So the astrology of the week of 15 November 2021 through 21 November 2021, it brings this very potent lunar eclipse in Taurus near the fixed star Algol. It's an eclipse that's asking us to face fear, step through fear, feel fear and move into it, and also to examine the treatment of collective and interpersonal treatment of women and how that can be often so poor. And so we're here to examine those themes this week. We also get a very powerful moon in Aries, one of the best moons that we've had in a long time. Before the eclipse happens and before we enter into eclipse season, this Aries moon can help us move into action. Quick summary, let's dive into the charts. Let's dive into what's going on this week. My name is S.J. Anderson, astrologer S.J. Anderson. Welcome to my channel. Here every week I talk about the astrology of the week. I walk through things that are going on with the astrology in particular. And what I'll do in this video is look first at the aspects of the planets this week, the exchanges they make with each other, the sign changes, the stations that the planets make, if any. Second, what I'll do is look at the moon, the signs the moon changes, the sign changes that the moon makes, which is so important to astrologers. The third thing I'll do is look at two charts of the week that I think are emblematic of the power of the week, of the theme or the energy of the week. And then finally, I will pull a tarot card as another layer of symbol to help us dig in or understand what this moment is asking of us. And that's what astrology is, right? It's a symbolic map overlaid on reality that activates certain symbolic energies, which can move mountains. I mean, symbols can move mountains, ideas can move mountains, thoughts can move mountains, in the sense that everything is narrative and story. Everything is how we describe the reality that we see. You look at children and it's like kind of blob reality. I don't know if we have an accurate understanding of what we've all experienced it, but of exactly what children are perceiving. Sometimes people think it's just energy, waves or blobs of color. But slowly, as we age and as we get into the maturity process, we begin to learn language and then identify objects with words. And reality starts then forming. We enter into a language matrix through our parents, through the television and the culture, and we start using words and sentences and syntax and grammar to build whole realities out of language, which is a type of symbol. A letter is a symbol. Letters together are words. They're symbols that then refer to things. And this is where you get into the poetics of like double meaning, double entendre. The way that you can say one word and it triggers a whole, historical, cultural, collective, intense narrative. And I think it's interesting this week because that one word in the astrology world is Algol. Algol is one of those words that when you say it to astrologers and amongst astrologers, there's usually this kind of gasp because people are so afraid of this fixed star. And I'm going to get all into that this week. That's the big story of this week, is that we have a lunar eclipse, already a very intense energy, very close to this, ominous, often considered an inauspicious fixed star. But we're going to explore why that is, or at least part of why I think that is, and how we can work with this energy this week. But so that's a little bit I'm not even sure how I got on this thing, this idea of symbols and thoughts. I was saying that the astrology is so important as a symbol layer with reality. And so that's what I hope to do every week, is just add something to your narrative, the narrative you're writing for your own life and speaking into, existence with your own life. And I think eclipse season, which we're now on the cusp of, and then this week we fully dive into, can be just about that. It can be about rearranging the narratives that we tell ourselves, and cleansing and cleaning and getting new narratives. Eclipse is this idea of fated beginnings and endings is kind of the key phrase that a lot of people throw around. And it's just true. That third eye, we squeegee that third eye, like Bill Hicks would say. During eclipse season, there's real opportunities for that. So we're here in eclipse season. It's we've gone through so much, the fixed square that's in the sky right now, so many, every chart has a fixed axis, but that intensity there, so Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, Leo risings. I mean, you're right in the eye of this really intense activation astrologically. And now we get eclipses, the first one in this fixed axis. And I've been talking about this week in some readings, is that the fixed signs of our chart, it's not only 2021, but then it's 2022, where fixed signs are heavily activated with some very intense transits. So just hang on, enjoy the ride if you can. I mean, enjoy the upheaval and the intensity and the upgrade and the stops and starts. Just enjoy it. That's what life is, in my view. It's kind of made to be enjoyed. The intense parts of it. Sometimes we can just, in those moments of the most intensity, the loves, the relationships, the childbirths, all of that, the crying, it's like we can kind of stop and say, wow, I'm a human being, and there's this massive intensity that I get to experience. Sometimes that kind of bird's eye view can help us as we're going through things, particularly fixed signs, this year and into 2022. So it's a little bit of an introduction. Always good to just kind of riff here at the start and try to contextualize this week in the larger week. So that's all I would say. We kick off eclipses on a new axis, Taurus, Scorpio. Those eclipses will be here all of 2022 into 2023. Starts now, so there's some newness in this week. And then the other thing I'll just say is that this is eclipse season, that when we're on the other side of it, we're sort of moving into a whole nother 6-month story between this eclipse season and the eclipse season next, I think, April, May. And all the astrology that's going to happen between these two eclipse seasons, we're now kind of building into some new stories. Jupiter will change signs at the end of December. Venus will go retrograde at the end of December. Venus is in Capricorn now, where it will be retrograde. So we're getting into a whole new set of stories. That's what's also cool about eclipse season, is that it kind of activates and triggers the next phase. And I'm excited about it, I'm excited about kind of getting Jupiter out of fixed signs, Jupiter into Pisces, get Mars and Venus. They'll be moving together much of the next 6 months, helping each other. So, all right, let's just dive in here. I think that's all I want to say as a bit of an introduction. Let's just dive in, because there's a lot thematically here that is intense. And so I want to try to efficiently express it. I might tend to just go off with some of these themes because they're so powerful. But let's look here, what's happening this week with the aspects. So the week starts off on the 15th of November. We're looking at this Monday, and 8 or 9 p.m. Central European time, Sun square Jupiter. I love that this week, it starts with a Jupiter aspect to the Sun, and then it will end on Sunday with a Jupiter aspect to Mercury, both squaring the Sun and Mercury from Scorpio, receiving those rays that Jupiter will cast back from Aquarius. I think it adds a flavor. Last week we had Mars, Mercury, and Saturn all dynamically activated. This week we get some softer energy with Jupiter playing a role here, and Jupiter sending its whatever it can send back to the Sun and back to Mercury. I've said the whole of this Jupiter and Aquarius cycle, there's this notion that Jupiter is basically giving what it can, even if it's not very much here in Aquarius. And the reason why I say that is because Jupiter gets, especially in Capricorn, when Jupiter was really having to get resourceful and feed Saturn and feed the Saturn energy. Even here still in Aquarius, Jupiter is filtering through Saturn and is co-present with Saturn. So there's very much a sense of Jupiter kind of, Saturn maybe sucking out, or you might think about it ringing off Jupiter. Saturn is boundaries, structures, borders. So Saturn is kind of ringed off Jupiter and is kind of keeping it to itself in a way, and making sure that what Jupiter does, the abundance, the expansion, the truth, the wisdom, the knowledge, the religious idea, all of that, the hopeful optimism, all of that is contained within a Saturnine vibe, a Saturnine mode of operation. And so that's why I've always said here, like I've written here, Jupiter gets in on the action, sending rays back, and it's been given over to Saturn, but look for the silver lining. So even though you have maybe a contained Jupiter, there are silver linings. Certainly it feeds Saturn, so that all of that Aquarius sector gets well fed by Jupiter, but whatever it can send back, maybe a little bit of a silver lining to this Scorpio Aquarius square this week, maybe we can come into some understandings of what happened last week, understandings of your whole fixed story, of the fixed parts of your chart. Look for the modality, and if you're using the whole sign house system, look for the what type of houses. So the angular, cadent, or succedent, those are the three subcategories of houses. What did the fixed signs comprise? For example, your angular houses, you might reflect there. How has it changed your selfhood, your relationships, your career, your home during this last week in this big intensity? Do the fixed signs comprise your cadent houses? That's a whole different vibe and energy of falling away from movement, change of mentality, even obstacles around health or with others. The cadent movements, maybe that's what's been going on with you, or the succedent, the houses that then rise up to become angular. That's relational often, finances and resources. So you can think about fun. How have those themes been impacted? It's just one way in to thinking about when a mode of the signs gets activated, cardinal, mutable, or fixed. That also activates a house, one of the three categories of houses. A little bit of astrological technique there. I know some of you out there aren't as technically deep with the astrology, but some of you are. So my role is to kind of find that balance. But it's just one way to think about and reflect here. What are the silver linings? We're on this home stretch of support in a way before the lunar eclipse happens. That will happen on Friday, the 19th at 9:10 in the morning here in Central Europe. But we get Monday and Sunday Jupiter activating, then the Sun, and then Mercury. So it's kind of before and after this eclipse this week. We can touch base with Jupiter and say, where is the sweetness here with some of that fixed sign activation? That's the point I was trying to make. I got lost on a point of astrological technique. Easy to do for astrologers. But let's come back here. This Algol Lunar Eclipse in the middle of the week on Friday, it's by its nature. Eclipses by their nature are strange, serious, and heavy. And I'll have many rants in this video about eclipses, but just know there's a heightened awareness of the kind of nature of reality. That's how I've been thinking about it this week, of what that eclipses bring. They show us the true nature of the reality we're in. You see the sun gets covered. It's nighttime during the day. Isn't that completely strange? Or the moon gets red, a reddish hue on the moon when the lunar eclipses are the most potent. And so it forces us to say, what am I really in? Most days the sun and moon look a certain way, and now we get this very rare, if in any given location, it's like once every several years you get these eclipses that are visible. But once every several years, a very rare occurrence, you have this strange alteration that then begs the question, well, what really is this reality? If there's a strange alteration that's kind of unexpected. And then we get people that are observers that map out and then use the eclipses and use mathematics to then understand theories of the solar system and visualizations of the solar system. Because eclipses exist, they teach us that, the structure of the reality we're in. So that's kind of, just to summarize, the way of looking at it is, what am I really in? What really is reality? These eclipses trigger that inquiry, and they bring us into this kind of deeper understanding of that. So that's why I like them. I very much like them. But that can be intense if you're shown, this is the true nature of your reality. Sometimes that's shocking. Sometimes that requires grief or loss or separation or endings and beginnings. That's why they say fated beginnings and endings. Let's say it's a relationship. You often hear eclipses related to relationships. People maybe start a relationship or end a relationship, whether that's romantic or friendship or whatever. The eclipses is like, okay, here's the true nature of the dynamic and what people want or are bringing to a situation. That gets exposed, and then the people respond to that truth, and often that can be deeper or not. I've seen, or separation. I've just been seeing this week again a few times, like eclipses in the 7th house, meeting a partner, marrying a partner. The truth of the nature of that connection emerges, and then that commitment deepens. The eclipses bring that energy. When the nodes transit every 18 months through a sign, that's where the eclipses happen. So a little bit about the eclipses, but that hits midweek. the true nature of the reality, the veil being lifted temporarily. That's the opportunity of an eclipse season. The 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the 2 or 3 syzygies that comprise an eclipse season. That's kind of the opportunity. And I always recommend, and I'll talk about this some later, of just the spiritualized feelings that we can bring into an eclipse season, and just appreciate that we're being given a chance to experience the greater truth about the reality through the intense eclipse energy. So the themes about Algol, the one other thing I just wanted to say here, we're talking Friday, the 19th of November, 10 a.m. in Central Europe. The eclipse is activated. We won't see it here. In America, you're going to have a nice visualization of this eclipse. Some people say don't go out in the eclipse light. I probably wouldn't, but if you like that, and if you're wanting to do that, they say this is the longest eclipse of the century, or in like several 100-year period. Maybe there's a chance to do that if that's your thing. I've seen one before. I've been out in one. So let's just come back here. The thing is that the themes of Algol, like I was saying in the introduction, these are the most serious themes we have in astrology. You open up any book, the first thing they say, demon star, most evil demon star in the sky. Demon star, most evil star in the sky. I don't say that to scare anybody, because my experience working with Algol is that it's almost like that's part of the energy of the star. It's triggering the fear, the worst fears that we can have, so that we learn to be with fear and face fear. And Dune, I saw Dune, the thing about Dune, fear is the mind killer. And so what does he say after that? I will learn to be with the fear and let go of the fear, only I will remain. Like the true light of self remains, and the fear has fallen away, because we had an opportunity to see the truth that fear is the mind killer and work with the fear being the mind killer. So Algol is unique in that it gives us an opportunity. What better time to trigger up these kind of deep fears, and then have the chance to say, it's just a mind killer. Fear is a boogeyman. It's the great boogeyman. And have an experience of knowing that in a visceral, tangible way, and then we're stronger because of it. See, Algol, I think, is wanting us to integrate the power of holding fear and not being swayed by it in a way that is, unhealthy. Maybe that's the best way of saying it. And I'll talk about this. So I've watched Fight Club recently. I watched Dune, the new Dune, recently. I'll just talk about it here. Why not? I have it written down later. But in both of those movies, there's scenes related to pain on the hand. And so in Dune, this is part of the training of Paul Atreides early in the film, or it's like a test he's given by one of the Bene Gesserit, I think is what they say. I'm not a Dune nerd. I've enjoyed the movies the last year. Once they announced the adaptation was coming out, I watched all of the Dune movies. But it's a really cool scene where she comes in and basically says, "You die." She puts this old wizard lady, witch, so-called lady. I don't really like the term witch. I guess it's okay. But this wise kind of mage, or this magician woman, who's the head of this lineage, the kind of matriarch of this lineage. She's testing Paul because he's so powerful, and she pulls out a needle to pierce his jugular, his vein, or where's the jugular? To pierce the side vein. And she basically says, "You're going to die. Put your hand in the box, and if you remove your hand, you are going to die." And Paul, it's one of the great lines. You can see it in the trailer, so I'm not really giving anything away. He says, "Well, what's in the box?" And she says, "Pain." And so he's got his hand in the box, and it's just excruciating pain. Of course, it's not real. It's a psychological test. And in that moment, he's like, fear is the mind killer. I don't know if he says it in that scene, but the idea is that he's being tested mentally. The mental ability to endure mental pain is being tested, and then he removes his hand, and he's very powerful. He lasted a long time. And that's what I think the opportunity with an eclipse like this is that everybody's so afraid. Test your mental pain. So, okay, be in fear. Go do the day with holding fear, working with fear. Try to keep the body calm and centered in spite of a little bit of fear. Keep that with meditation practices or spiritual practices. So it'll force us into a spiritual connection as a way to face something that is scary. then we realize, whoa, that fear was just something that other people put on me, like some other astrological text threw this fear on me. This collective matrix of energy I described earlier, that maybe was put on us. And then we can say, well, what's in the present moment? I'm sitting, I'm breathing, I'm aligned, I'm powerful, I'm strong. That fear is just, it's there floating around somewhere, but I still have this power. And when that fear goes, when this eclipse is over, 3-4 months, you're going to still be here. And the powers that you gained from being with and walking through a fear moment will remain. I will remain, they say in Dune. I'll talk about the Fight Club scene later in the talk. But it's a big fear, it's a theme of this week and of this Algol energy, the opportunity to face and confront very hyped up, intense astrological symbols and move into those symbols and know you're powerful, know you're protected. So let's move now. That's a lot, isn't it? There's a whole lot. That's what I'm saying. We can talk about so much with this theme in this week. I want to keep moving. I don't want to get too overwhelmed here. So let's go to the moon. What is the moon doing this week? The moon is only changing signs twice. So we start the week with the Aries moon. We're in that, not yet. We're still in this Pisces moon. I love this Aries moon. My gosh, this has been one of my favorite moons on the calendar for months. So excited to finally be here. I'm going to break down the chart, the transit of the week. It's happening already on Sunday. I'm going to get this video out as soon as I can so you can see this hopefully early in the week and enjoy this Aries moon. Part of why I talked about it in the last week's video was to give give everybody heads up in that video that the Aries moon, so there's that little buzz, just started with my, what is it out here? It's a kind of meter. Hopefully that's not a problem. I think there was comments in the last week's video, not a problem with that buzz. So I'm just going to continue. Hopefully it's not an issue. It'll last for like an hour or something, so I want to just keep recording. But so I was giving a heads up in the last week's video because I try to release these on Sunday. Lately it's been a little bit later in the day for me. But let's say you watch it on Monday or Tuesday, this video, and you missed this Aries moon. Well, hopefully last week's heads up gave you a clue here. But I'm going to break down this Aries moon chart in detail. Love it, love it. The thing about it is it's just before eclipse season. It's the last moon we have waxing. It's a waxing moon, growth, before eclipse season. The last one we have before I'll be turning down. I'm already feeling the eclipse. We all, I think, are. But this still is a moon that comes right before the moon enters the sign where it will be eclipsed, and maybe there's some opportunities for action here. It's right on the edge. But Mars in Scorpio rules the moon. You want the ruler of the moon powerful. We get that this week. It's a gateway, I think, into eclipse season. It's a nice climax of movement, and then we kind of fall into this eclipse period for 2 weeks, a month. And so, it might be that there's been building opportunities in your life, or you've been waiting. This is the time that maybe some of you want to move here on Monday with the power of this moon and the ruler of the moon being so powerful, Mars, a planet of action. So, then the eclipse hits. So then the moon here on Wednesday, early, 3 in the morning, Central Europe, enters Taurus, where it will be eclipsed on Friday, about 10 in the morning. So we'll have this buildup of this Taurus moon moving into the eclipse. I think these days, Wednesday and Thursday, are days to really deepen the spiritual energy of how you want to experience the eclipse. I like that this eclipse is in later degrees because we have a whole buildup in those early degrees of Taurus to work with it and prepare mentally and emotionally. And then, so Friday the eclipse hits. I have spiritual mantra. I'll talk about that later, but I always recommend the spiritual practices. I mean, we have all kinds of spiritual traditions, the human inheritance, all sorts of prayer and beadwork and mantra and meditation of all flavors and all types. Find one you like. Find one that works for you and just work with that vibe or energy. Even if you're not a spiritual person, talk to your unconscious, visualize the self or the unseen. I mean, the power of the imagination alone is spiritual because you can see and create anything in your mind and work with that and be with that emotionally. That's, to me, unseen powers, spiritual powers, right? The definition of spirituality, one definition that I like, things that are unseen, right, that are operative. Scientific materialism would say, well, those are fake or something like that. Spirituality says, no, there's these potent, unseen energies that we can work with. I still think there's a bridge between science and spirituality at some point, and there's like a language or a way to articulate their connection that we're maybe still developing, hopefully, so that a lot of things we consider so-called spiritual will eventually be so-called science. I don't even like that dichotomy, frankly. Let me not rant on that. Let me come back. We end the week here, 19 November, 3:30. That's not Sunday. That is Friday, the day of the eclipse. So after the eclipse happens later in the day, we get a Gemini moon. I sort of like it because, the Mercury's in Scorpio. I think the Gemini moon just brings us back into this ongoing fixed square. We get more opportunities to deal with this fixed square, but more of an integrative phase, a waning integrative phase. And the moon is not squaring Saturn, it's not squaring Mars in Gemini, it's with that North Node, but we just had a lunar eclipse. Maybe it's good to just be, still feeling some of that North Node energy, but we're settling with the waning moon. Excuse me. So that is my sense of how the moon will operate this week. We're going to break down these charts now. Let's move here. That's my, the feeling of the moon. Lunar eclipse, we begin waning and resting in terms of the cycle. But before that lunar eclipse on Friday, we're peaking into the growth phase of this lunation cycle. So that's sort of the big theme. With these moon examinations, I really like to think, is it waxing, is it waning, when does that shift happen? Because it does impact the symbolism of our most sensitive point, the moon, and our relationship to it. It's nice to know when it's growing and it's settling. And you can use that just as a symbol as you think about how you move into reality, move into the actions you're taking. So let's move. Charts of the week, the two charts of the week. Well, first I want to just describe here and settle in. This is the transit of the week. I didn't write it here, but this is my transit of the week. I love this Aries moon. Just to walk through some of the things on the chart. Safe from Saturn and Mars. Look, there's no angular aspects. Saturn and Mars are not in cardinal signs. And so this moon is again part of the cardinal opportunity of 2021, where cardinal signs are free from dynamic activation from Mars, Saturn, and the nodes much of the year. We get another one here, a waxing moon, growth, action, adding to reality, doing things that you want to have expand. That is part of this moment. Aries, I love the Aries moon energy because it's the way we can use the themes of Mars, and it's fire sign, right? The passion of life, how that passion expresses itself and what we want to move to and create with that passion. That's encased here in this Aries moon. The thing about an Aries moon, you love Mars and Scorpio. I do, for an Aries moon. One of my favorite electional times is when you have a waxing Aries moon with Mars and Scorpio, because Mars is not forcing its hand or dominating the moon via an angular relationship. That's what I mean by it's safe. So the moon gets some rest from Mars. But as we know, in any moment of time that you capture, the ruler of the moon is the ultimate outcome of any course of action that we take in electional astrology. And so to have such a powerful ruler very much supports the moment and the actions that we're going to take in this moment. And actually this is in, I believe, the Queen Elizabeth's coronation chart. You can correct me on that, but it's an Aries moon with a queen, the first Queen Elizabeth. John Deal made that election. Aries moon with Mars in Scorpio. If it's not that chart, it's the Baghdad chart. I believe one of those two charts, the foundation of Baghdad, has this Aries moon Scorpio Mars dynamic. That's why I love it so much. Part of why I love it so much is we have great electional astrologers of the past have used this same energy. And it's because the ruler of the moon has power and strength, Mars and Scorpio. So let's come back. I want to just say, so that's the second reason why I love it. Last actions before eclipse season. You might want to think coming in right at the deadline with doing some things before we settle. Like I said earlier, it's go time I have here in terms of action, because look at this, both benefics make these favorable aspects to the moon as well. Another thing we love about any moment of time for action. Jupiter makes the sextile by sign, okay? It's in Aquarius sextiling the moon. Venus in Capricorn makes the square to the moon, both earlier in zodiacal order, flooding or overcoming the moon. So we have great benefic power supporting this moon, and we have all of the other components of a good election. I mean, I just love it, love it, love it. The other thing is here is that the moon in this chart, the last aspect it made was to Venus, and the next aspect is to Jupiter. So not only are those benefics well configured by sign, they are by aspect. It's not quite a benefic enclosure, it's a little far, but it's darn close. For all intents and purposes, it may be considered one. And this is like an awesome, awesome, awesome chart. I'll just say it. I love it, I love it. And I think it's a great way into the beginning of this week. So if we look at the lunar mansions, it's something I really love to do. Lunarium.co.uk, lunar mansion. This is that second lunar mansion, Al Butane. And where you are, it's all location dependent, but like where I am, I can get a Cancer rising with the moon right between Venus and Jupiter, close to the midheaven. This is a powerful way to get the moon. The 10th house, the 11th house, those are my favorite houses to put the moon. Maybe the 9th house if you need to. Try to get it with the midheaven or as close to the midheaven as possible. That's what I look for most. The cool thing is if you get a Cancer rising, you have a rising sign that's also safe from Mars and Saturn. That's less of a concern from my preferences. I know some astrologers, that's all they care about is the rising sign. I care only about the moon, frankly, and then the rising sign's a secondary consideration. But you can still get an awesome Cancer rising if you kind of time it right. Look at this lunar mansion. Trade, finding treasures. That's what it's good for. Seeking favor from those in position of authority. Sowing seeds. There's that song, Sowing the Seeds of Love. I just came to my mind seeing that. I won't sing it, but it's a great song. Let's see, is it Tears for Fears, I think is the artist. Traveling by land, using fire or hunting. But these are all very active things. You have here essence, effort, courage, will, energy. So it's like an energetic moment here with this moon and using it to get out into the world and do things. This is Lunarium's take. It summarizes writers on the lunar mansions. These little high-level summaries on their website, but it says not good for love and friendship or being passive. Maybe this isn't the time to sit back. It's a time to be out. The thing about it is that we get the Taurus moon next and the eclipse. That's when it's really time to kind of withdraw. So look for this Monday opportunity. Very much enjoy it. I can't wait. I'm going to enjoy it. I've got a lot of things I'm planning to do. So that is the transit of the week, the Aries Moon, the waxing Aries Moon. Let's now shift and get into the eclipse chart. This is the second chart I'm going to look at this week. Here we are, the Algol Lunar Eclipse, the one many have been talking about. First eclipse in Taurus Scorpio axis, kicking off a whole new eclipse story for everybody's chart in the fixed signs. It's intense. We're here and it's intense, and eclipse season is always intense. I'm going to break down quickly the chart here. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to my second slide first. I'm just going to move that up because this is the one I like that kind of summarizes an approach to eclipses energetically that's independent of the configurations of this eclipse. First, get spiritual. Turn inward. I've talked about that already in this talk, so I'm not going to expand too much on it here. Reality is showing you its hand. You're closer to God than you'll be ever, maybe, in terms of astrological, types of astrological configurations. These are the God transits. Hand of God interjecting itself, moving the reality around to bring fate, what you're here to do. That's this moment. So get spiritual. Even just listening to this video it hopefully triggers that somehow. That's a spiritual thing. I try to bring a spiritual energy to these videos, but it's like the awe of our reality. Appreciate it. Get in tune with it and in touch with it. Second, reality's architecture is exposing itself. I talked all about that, but this has been one of my favorite metaphors. It's like looking under the hood and we can see, oh, whoa, look at these connections. That's when the moon blocks out the sun, the earth blocks out the moon, or the sun and light from the moon. That's what it's exposing. And I'll just refer you to earlier in this talk, my explication of that. So Rahu mantra as a settling force. The North Node is called Rahu in Vedic astrology. The Vedic system and the Hindu tradition has mantra as very much a part of its spirituality. I do this every eclipse season. I go to YouTube, I type Rahu mantra. There's a bunch of them. Find one you resonate with. Listen to it some. Put it on as background music. It's a way to spiritualize the moment and spiritualize the eclipse moment. And I'll probably listen to some of those today, or maybe, but definitely when the moon enters Taurus on Wednesday, early in the morning in Central Europe, that's when I really will probably start settling into some heavy-duty mantra for that Wednesday, Thursday, and then into the eclipse moment on Friday. I've already talked about fated beginnings and endings. That's what eclipses bring. Look for that in your life. Maybe something will start or end. Look for the Taurus sector of your chart. What sign, what house does Taurus comprise? Those are the themes that I would begin digging into to understand maybe how your eclipse, this new cycle, will impact you. Remember, it's two signs that are opposite each other. It's an axis of signs that are activated, and often the houses can have similar themes. And so let's take the ninth house, for example. Let's say Taurus is your ninth house. Well, you're then now in a new cycle of ninth, third. Spirituality, worldview, reality frame, communication, all of those things that are in play over the next 18 months. You may get a whole new religion. You may get new teachers. You may go to school. So that's how I would begin analyzing it. We enter then also a 2-week land between eclipses. And this is something a lot of astrologers will talk about, that this period can be a strange kind of in-between world. We've opened up the spiritual gateway on Rahu with the lunar eclipse, and now we're in like the dream space, you might say. Then that will close with that solar eclipse in Sagittarius. But it's a very strange kind of limbo land. And it's almost like that opportunity. I just saw a film, Dreamscapes. This movie, it's early in the 80s with, Christopher Plummer was in it. There's a bunch of famous actors in it. Dennis Quaid played the lead, but they're all about they're doing work in the dream realm. That's what it can feel like with eclipse vibes and eclipse energy in this 2-week period. It's like this dreamy state where we're a little bit closer to the divine, a little bit closer to the truth about reality. So that is some of the things I want to just say off the bat with what triggers here on Thursday during the eclipse. Let me come now to the actual chart and some of these configurations. So first I want to say moon, in this case, is angular by sign to the pile up in Scorpio and angular to both the planets in Aquarius. We again have 6 of the 7 traditional planets in fixed signs. Heavy duty fixed activation. We're getting now deeply into those stories that I think will be here, probably have already been around for a while, and they're now activating in new ways and will continue to be here for 2022. You know, this fixed story, what I was speaking about earlier. But no, this is on its own. If you have the moon opposite Saturn or Mars and square Saturn or Mars in the same chart by sign, you're dealing with intensity, maximum intensity. You know, you add to it an eclipse, it's like then you multiply that by a factor. So we're dealing with maximal intensity here. I wouldn't be surprised to see crazy stuff in the media, crazy news stories, insane. I mean, just turn on the news. It's insane all over the world. All that's in play. I don't even want to talk about that because we know that's like you can just say, insert crazy world, period. You know what I'm talking about. You're living it and experiencing it in your life. So that could all go haywire. And from a mundane astrological perspective, with this intense Mars-Saturn relationship to the moon on an eclipse near this intense fixed star. So it's a greatly intensified, triggered moment. And right out of the gate, we look at the configurations. This is not a lunar eclipse. It's like with Jupiter and Venus and averse to the malefic. No, everything, the most intense symbols we have are all thrown into the pot here. So just hang on. And I think it means even more why we want to grab and utilize our spiritual energy and our spiritual practice. The moon is ruled by Venus and Mars. And so this is what I'm starting to look in here. Taurus is ruled by Venus, by domicile, the domicile rule of Taurus. But the Egyptian terms here of Mars are so the terms in domicile, it's 1, 2, what I look at always. Mars is strong in Scorpio. Venus has some dignity in Capricorn, the triplicity ruler there if you're during the daytime. So you get the rulers that are also configured to the moon. Venus makes the trine, Mars makes the opposition. The rulers of the moon receive the moon by aspect. That is some mitigation, I think, and especially that trine from Venus, the overcoming trine from Venus and Capricorn, a serious Venus, a Venus that's deliberate, that's kind of slower paced, gives the moon some of that maybe more stable Venusian power that comes with a Capricorn Venus. So I like that configuration as a way to kind of augment and protect us a little bit from the intensity. Venus is safety and comfort and pleasure and joy. Maybe we can look for some of that as a way to just, even like a glass of water is a simple thing, or a simple bowl of rice is a Venusian pleasure that's a simplified pleasure that we can enjoy. You go to a monastery, it's all simple meals. You go to a meditation retreat, it's very toned down beauty, but it's so powerful. Sometimes you strip away things and you get to the essence of like the taste of a food, or of the just rubbing my hands, the essence of the pleasure of that tactility. That's the simple pleasure of Venus in Capricorn. That can feed into this moon during this time, and I think that really helps here, having this configuration with Venus. So that's some of the chart here, and the aspects of the chart. Let me shift now, because this is the big thing with this chart, is that the fixed stars. We're going to talk deeply about Algol, but before we do that, there's about 16 stars, 16 I think, 15, 16 stars that are on this list of stars. The Behenian, I think is how you say that, fixed stars. These are a list of fixed stars that astrologers and astrological magicians and kind of Hermetic philosophers in the Middle Ages, Cornelius Agrippa, these famous kind of magical astrological authors, they got a list of the most powerful stars. They're usually the brighter stars in the sky. But I often just like to see in any chart, are any of these 16, I add a couple to the list. I like to add Polaris, and then what else do I add? I think Fomalhaut, which is not a Behenian fixed star, but is a royal star. Those are two that I put on my list of like short list of stars that I always like to look at. In this eclipse chart, so you have the moon on Algol within 1 degree. That's the orb I really like to use. But you've got Mars with Alphecca, the fixed star of creativity, and Corona Borealis, the crown. So maybe some of that action can be creative oriented right now. There's a creative ways to feel out this energy. Maybe you want to create as a way to cope or spiritualize this moment. And then you have the moon with Deneb Algedi. That's in the tail of the sea goat of Capricorn. It's a star of heavy seriousness. It's got the nature, it's similar to Jupiter and Saturn, the two great planets, the heavy-duty planets that change reality when they come together. So there's these auspicious stars also activating this eclipse chart with heavy-duty energy. But let's move to Algol now. I'm not going to talk about Alphecca or Deneb Algedi more than I just have, but Algol is the big theme. And if you're afraid out there, I know I've got friends and clients, they're like, oh no, Algol, I've been afraid. It's close to this part of my chart. What should I do? I want to say right away, that's your opportunity. Fear is the mind killer. When the fear is gone, only you will remain. And the universe wants you right now to be with the fear as a way to transmute it, to feel it, be with it, to know that you're stronger than your fear. Really, I think that's one kind of short theme here. Algol's teaching you you're stronger than your fear. And not only that, it's the gift of fear. It's the gift that fear can bring, because then we have to confront things that are already inside of us. See, fear is a trigger of deeper, an order of things that lies deeper in our unconscious or subconscious that we then have to face. So that's one. I think that here's what I have written: themes of the so-called quote-unquote dark feminine. I'm not sure how much I like that noun phrase, but there's whole bodies of literature around it. Lilith, the kind of excluded, marginalized, exploited feminine. Those are the themes that are automatically brought in with Algol, okay? The story is the Gorgon Medusa. She was raped by Neptune. To say it directly. And that trauma was part of what then demonized because of that. You see it so often in society, even current contemporary cultures punish women when they're raped. And so it's intense. I mean, I'm gonna just, as a trigger warning, sorry, I should have done that earlier. These are intense themes I'm about to talk about. So just know that if it's too much, maybe you want to skip this part. But That's why, so again, this is why Algol has this fear and intensity, because it brings up really, really intense themes that hit to the core of our humanity and the kind of the core of the violence and the kind of oppression of our humanity. And that's why people are, I think, afraid of Algol. We have to go into that and see these kind of dark parts of us, the collective and even in our own lives. And most people don't want to do that or can't do that or will delay doing that. And so Algol says, no, you got to do it. You got to face it. And that's why I think it's so necessary of an energy, forcing us to see the darkness. Without seeing that, if we were ignoring that forever, life would just go on with these kind of reenactment of unseen, negative forces. This is the opportunity to see, transmute, feel these kind of dark forces and this dark energy. But that's what happened to Medusa, right? A maiden, she gets raped, and then it kind of then is demonized, and then that's where you get this dark energy of the violence and her grappling with that violence. So what I have here, it's part of why we're afraid of Algol. We have to own the violence and heal it. I want to move on to this next slide. So this is an article I found online. I love just the headline, Medusa, How We Made a Rape Victim into a Monster, How Medusa's Story Can Help Us. This is the key phrase, this is the key theme here. Reflect on how we treat women. That's what I think ultimately the Algol energy wants us to do, reflect on how we treat women. And during a time when Venus is in Capricorn, about to go retrograde, we'll be there for 4 months, this long Venus retrograde in a sign where Venus has day triplicity rulership. It's perfect and it rules, Venus rules this eclipse. This is a doubling up of theme, because a reviewal and a reflection is what a Venus retrograde is. Venus is women in the ancient system. And so there's two things in the sky right now that are pointing us to reflect on how we treat women. I want to do that. I hope to be working with this. I think we'll be forced to. That's what eclipses do. They force us into things. Have you seen that meme where it's like a woman holding another woman and she's pouring milk? She's got her hair pulled back and like putting the milk. It's like forcing this woman to drink milk. That's kind of what eclipses are. It's like you have to see this theme. You have to know, you can't ignore it. And I think with this doubling up of symbolism, Venus retrograde in Capricorn, a lunar eclipse in Taurus, Venus ruling that eclipse, we're going to be forced into this, reflecting on how you treat women. And I know many women out there listen to this. How do you treat yourself? What's your relationship to yourself? I think societally, we have to collectively own the mistreatment of women. There's so much of the over-sexualized kind of nature of the objectification, I think is the term I was looking for. And I don't mean to not be sex positive here, but I think there is a kind of an objectification that we can explore that the society brings into how we perceive women. I know my whole life, you go to the grocery store, it's just these beauty magazines everywhere. I think there's a certain objectification that I grew up with. So processing those types of collective themes, we've all had relationships to women in our lives. I really think about the collective structures of society here and how like even things like menstruation, that's not supported. I'm reading stories like they don't have menstrual products. It's a tax. Women get taxed, or women that menstruate get taxed because of the natural flow of the body. And that cycle is part of our humanity, right? We're all born from that cycle, because that is the egg of life, right? And then we come and mature in a modern society, and we want to hide that away. We want to shun that away and make people pretend like that doesn't exist. That's the kind of violence that I want to go to, this kind of foundational structural violence against the female body that we can have built in. Whereas you read about some lunar cultures or hunter-gatherer cultures, sometimes you had ways of organizing society where you would bring a ceremony into that process, and women and men might separate, and you would have menstruation as a ritual ceremony, and so these are the kind of structural kind of embedded things that I think are very ripe to begin to feel into. I just saw a tweet recently, as I was writing this, women are being charged with crimes for miscarriages. Impoverished women maybe don't have the resources, have a miscarriage, and they're being blamed for a murder. I think it's just in Oklahoma, 1,500 women arrested for miscarriage. It's wrong. It's just wrong. And so these are the kind of structural themes that I think this also will call into play. It's both interpersonal, our personal relationship to how we treat women and the women in our lives. It's our own femininity, especially for men out there, the inner woman. I've got my inner woman and my inner femininity. What's my relationship to that? Do I want to keep that away or shun that, or am I going to integrate it and feel it? So there's a lot here. I don't want to die. We could have hundreds of videos on this theme, but so I'm just going to leave it there. And that is the big part of this moment. So I just remember, reflect on how we treat women. This is ultimately a healing thing. Fear is the mind killer. When the fear leaves, I remain. That's my paraphrase of the Dune. It's a healing opportunity, I think, with any time we have this intense energy. So the last thing I'll leave you with, so I have here collective wound that we can attempt to more fully not turn away from. The idea that we have to see it to heal it. You can't gloss it over, you can't run from it, you can't sugarcoat it, or you can't euphemize it. Some of this stuff you have to see clearly and feel the wounds. There's no way around it. And this is where I'm going to end with the Fight Club. So there's this scene in Fight Club. Tyler Durden has the main character's, the Edward Norton character's hand at one point, and he puts lye, it's a chemical, on his hand, and it's a chemical burn on his hand, and he's holding him there. And the character played by Edward Norton is like, "Oh no, stop!" And Tyler Durden is like, You need to focus. This is the most important moment of your life. Do you understand this? That you are in this intense pain from a chemical burn, and you want to run from it. You want to, and Edward Norton starts trying to meditate, to kind of spiritualize away the pain that's right in front of him. And Tyler is like, no, he slaps him. Feel this, see this pain. This is what's happening. Don't run from it. And it's this kind of confrontation that is the gift of a moment like this, where we need to feel the pain, we need to see the pain and not run from it, and honestly sit there with it. That is a meditation, actually. Not a taking away, but the meditation of being with. So I'm going to leave the weekly astrology with that. Let's get a tarot card just to kind of move into the symbols here and add another layer. Let me just pull one here. So, okay, we got the tarot card. Let's see what this card is going to bring as a additional layer of energy and an additional symbol here. This card is the, here we go. It is the 5 of Diamonds. Okay, we had this card last week. So we get, that's an, that is the universe saying, let's think about the 5 of Diamonds. Suppression, Mercury in Taurus. This is the first decan, so 2, 3, 4. That's the first, those are the decans of Capricorn, cards 2, 3, 4 of Diamonds. So 5, 6, 7. This is Taurus, first decan of Taurus. You know, we're going to have the moon in this decan this week as we're preparing for the eclipse. The moon enters this decan on Wednesday. I talked on this video about preparing on Wednesday and Thursday for the eclipse energy, getting the spiritual practices going, turning down life. I think this is, going to tell us, let's think about this Wednesday with the eclipse energy as we traverse the border of the moon from Aries into Taurus. We enter this decan. All of that active force of this Aries moon, it's like coming into this eclipse vibe immediately. It's a very stark shift. So that's something I would consider here. Suppression, and the idea of there's repress, which is, I think, an unconscious thing where we repress things. Suppression is the active force of when we know it's there, but then we try to force it down. I believe that's the definition of those two words. I'm not going to look them up here. Suppresses, you see it, you deliberately shun it. Represses the unconscious, you don't want to see it, so you try to avoid it. And I think this might be just a clue as we get into this eclipse this week. Talking, Mercury is talking, thinking, analyzing. As we see what the stories that this eclipse is going to be about, it can be easy to just want to, like Edward Norton, he's suppressing the pain, to try to work with the tendency to run from the fear, to kill the mind because of the fear we're feeling. I think this card is just the same themes we've already been talking about. How can we be with and write about and talk about, even to ourselves through journaling, getting it out, the fear writing fears, listing fears is a great way to deal with fear. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid that this can happen. I'm afraid that writing the fears, then you can see, okay, that's just in my mind. It's a way that we can not suppress, we can kind of deliberately go into, but there may be a tendency as things get intense to just not want to feel. And hey, I'm not going to poo-poo. I mean, I've taken some naps this week. I'm just going to give up for a few hours and go lay down. Always good as a self-care routine. I don't mean to come off here as like, that we need to be at the 10, totally spiritual and facing these few, that's can be too much and can be overwhelming. Maybe there's a wisdom in some suppression this week if we're triggered and saying, all right, I'm going to kind of suppress this temporarily through Taurian strategies, food, rest, all of those things. So I think there's a kind of a double-edged meaning here about how to deal with the intensity this week, both trying to see it and get it out, but at times maybe wanting to kind of suppress things if they're too intense. Always okay during an eclipse season, a moon square Saturn opposite Mars. So that is the weekly astrology. That is the weekly tarot. This is S.J. Anderson. Thank you for being here and thank you for coming to my channel. You can support me by liking this video or subscribing to the channel. You can always go to my website, sjanderson144.com, and schedule an astrology reading, or you can support my Patreon. Helps keep these videos going. Have an awesome day. Talk soon.